Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, the Marcos administration is rolling out several measures to shield Filipinos from price hikes induced by higher oil due to the Middle East conflict. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas vows vigilance on inflation as elevated oil prices impact purchasing power. Former Finance Secretary Gary Teves joins us live. And the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry is calling for a balanced and carefully studied approach to the proposed 4-day workweek. The government says it is taking swift action to roll out measures that will protect Filipinos from sudden price hikes amid tensions in the Middle East. In a statement, the Finance Department said it is closely monitoring global oil markets as rising tensions in the region threaten energy supply. It added the Energy Department is in talks with local oil companies to stagger possible fuel price hikes in the coming weeks to help ease the impact on consumers. Energy officials say the extent of any increase will be clear by the weekend, once 5-day global trading data is complete, with adjustments possibly taking effect next Tuesday. Meanwhile, transport agencies, both the DOTR and LTFRB, are preparing fuel subsidies for public utility vehicle operators to help keep fares stable. The Agriculture Department is also set to provide fuel aid to farmers and fisherfolk to help prevent food price spikes. Malacanang, for its part, said President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. may study a proposal for a 4-day workweek to save energy. The Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry is calling for a balanced and carefully studied approach to the proposed 4-day workweek. The PCCI says while the proposal aims to promote energy efficiency, lower operating costs, and protect employee well-being, it must also support data and consultations with various industries. It warns that sectors requiring continuous operations, such as manufacturing, could be significantly affected if workdays are reduced. The group says they're willing to work with government, labor groups, and other stakeholders to ensure the proposal benefits both the economy and Filipino workers. The proposal for a 4-day workweek surfaced as officials explore ways to ease the impact of possible fuel price hikes amid tensions in the Middle East that could push oil prices higher. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas assures the public the country's inflation outlook remains manageable, with expectations still well anchored. In a statement, the BSP says February inflation at 2.4% remains within its forecast range of 2.3 to 3.1%. However, the central bank slightly raised its 2026 inflation forecast to 3.6%, citing supply-side pressures. Inflation is projected to ease to 3.2% in 2027, close to the government's 3% target. The BSP adds it will remain vigilant and guided by incoming data, especially as it monitors developments in the Middle East that could affect oil prices and inflation in the near term. The Philippine peso extended its losses for the 6th straight session as the Middle East conflict continues to weigh on the local unit. The peso dropped yesterday by 6 centavos to close at 58.63 against the greenback, its worst finish since February 5. The local unit opens this Friday a tad weaker, 58.68 to the dollar. Traders say the peso continues to slide against the dollar amid the prolonged Mid-East conflict and its impact on oil prices. The conflict has bolstered demand for the dollar, a safe haven currency, which briefly hit 3-month highs yesterday. Fresh tensions in the Middle East are threatening higher oil prices, and with them, pressure on the government to respond, including granting President Marcos the power to suspend fuel excise taxes. So how far can the government go in providing relief without putting the country's public finances and economic recovery at risk? Our guest today is recognized as the Bankers Asia's Best Finance Minister in 2008. He helped stabilize the Philippine economy before and during the global financial crisis, championing broadening of tax reforms. Well, with us now for his views, former Philippine Finance Secretary Gary Teves. It's good seeing you again, Sec Gary. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
All right,
I hope
so
I can assist you.
Yes, you can indeed. So what do you make of a blanket suspension of excise taxes on oil?
Well, before deciding on that, let's try to see if other measures can take place, because that will take a little more study. But I would suggest perhaps targeting the contingent and the confidential funds, not only of the President, but other agencies like the Department of Agriculture, Transportation, and also the unconditional cash transfers, like the aid for individuals for in crisis situation, and also the DSW. I think the sum total of this is roughly about 80 billion, Cathy. So why don't we start on that and then work on determining whether we should really suspend the collection of excise taxes.
So why not?
Or
what's your concern about the suspension on excise taxes?
Yeah, there's another variance which is to decrease. No, so those things might take a little time. No,
how so, Secretary Gary? Why the concern? What do we need to do to make sure that we're doing the right thing before we suspend or give the president powers to suspend excise taxes?
Yes, of course, we need the support of not only the policymakers, both the executive and the department and Congress. I think LEDAC should really be activated more often, so that together we monitor the situation very well. And we need also to get the civil society to participate. We talk about, I think Juneri talked about earlier about the possibility of having some sacrifice in quality spending. This need not be the case if we are more rigorous really in the implementation of our 2026 budget with the assistance of civil society as well. No? So I think we need to help each other. It's not only going to be one department versus another.
If we take a look at the budget to GDP ratio, budget deficit to GDP ratio, there is a concern. It's at 5.6, and the debt to GDP ratio is over 63%.
Yes.
So if we do suspend the excise tax on oil, what impact could it have on these metrics?
Well, this will increase, no? Unless there is a corresponding reduction of expenditures on some other items, no? That's the only way, because you really look at it like a family budget, how much revenues will be reduced, and therefore, if you want to maintain the same percentage of the deficit as in relation to GDP, you've got to do something on the expenditure side, no?
And do something on the expenditure side at a time of a slowing economy. Are we able to find revenue sources to make up for the loss of a suspension in excise taxes?
It's not easy, because when the economy is slowed down, then there is a correlation in terms of the amount of taxes that you can collect during difficult times compared to times when we're moving faster. The economy is moving faster, no? Like a projection of 4 to 5%, you normally will have lower revenues compared to a 5 or 6%, no?
The direction right now appears to be studying the proposal to grant the president powers to suspend collection of excise taxes. If and when this happens, what sort of safeguards would you propose to make sure that it ends when it should?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about government money that's going to be impacted here, a big loss of at least 32 billion pesos, if indeed enacted.
Correct. I would suggest, because the proposal seems to be unclear as to how long the suspension will last or what kind of power the president will have. I'd like to see a limitation in terms of maybe X number of months, no? Something similar to the previous train law, which is a 3-month period. So that would be helpful. So if we're back to normal again, I think we can revert back to the previous setup of collecting excise taxes again. No, but I said there are so many other options, but I'd like to see immediate action right now on the use of some of the funds that are available, the contingency fund, the confidential funds, and the unconditional cash transfers like the AISCS and the Ayuda program.
Worth 80 billion pesos,
More or
as
less, yeah.
you mentioned. But what about implementation? Because
Yes,
this
okay.
is where the problem arises, doesn't it? And
Okay.
which got us into the flood control corruption scandal.
Correct. Well, right now, my understanding is that the DSWD is already a good system, and then the Department of Transportation has a similar one. But I'd like to see really an accelerated implementation of the new AID system to really determine the persons who should really be the recipient of the subsidies. No, so again, the participation of the civil society will be helpful. That these agencies are really giving it to the right persons. No?
And you're willing to give it a shot, even
Yes.
though the people of the Philippines haven't yet gotten over the trust and governance issues
Yes.
that we faced even before
Well,
the
this is
Middle
a
East
good
conflict.
test. That is a good test on the willingness of the government to allow civil society to monitor, and the active participation of the members of civil society as well. Governance is still an important issue here. No? With limited funds, I think we should be more careful about the use of these limited funds.
Indeed, and with higher oil, it becomes a tougher issue. You did make a mention of Jun Neri. I did speak with him. He's the lead economist of BPI, and he told me that the Middle East conflict may have just roiled our economic recovery plans. Let's listen to him.
Okay.
With this scenario in the Middle East, growth could even be threatened further, because instead of the budget going to education and other agencies and government, some of them might have to go to fuel subsidies instead, Cathy. So again, the ability to improve the quality of government spending could be affected by this conflict.
So do you agree, Secretary Gary, that the government may have lost its ability for quality spending because of the Middle East conflict?
As I said earlier informally, I don't think we should give up, and I think now is the time for a greater challenge on the part of the government to really scrutinize the implementation of the budget. Secondly, I mentioned about the participation of other groups like the civil society. We should really be more rigorous in our monitoring of the funds that are available. And besides, we don't know whether this is going to be temporary or over a longer period, but we should start having that kind of discipline and rigorous monitoring.
But even before the Middle East conflict, you'd been so concerned about the corruption and governance issues still
Yes.
unaddressed, possibly slowing economic growth for the first half?
Yes.
Before a recovery can even be
Yes.
had in the second. Do you think that the Middle East conflict may push out the recovery timeline further?
It may it may delay the recovery, and therefore, to the extent that we don't go below 4%, hopefully, I think we can still attain 4% for the year, despite the Middle East crisis. And hopefully it will not be too long. No.
Is anything bad about being at 4%? I mean, compare us with the ASEAN neighbors at 4%. Is that not a good benchmark for possibly
there are countries
worst-case
that are
scenario?
doing much better, like Vietnam, for example. But there are countries that have fallen below 4%. I'm not saying that our issues and problems right now are quite serious, that anywhere between 4 to 5%, and also now the Middle East conflict, will be somewhat tolerable. But of course, I'd always like to have more than 5%. But let's see what happens. This situation is so dynamic that we can review this as often as possible.
and pegged on your key concern, which is really trust and governance issues.
Yes.
So what you've repeated civil society many times in this conversation of ours. So what then do you think is the key role of civil society in helping government redeem itself from these governance issues at a time when higher oil is giving us less chance to make the most out of the budget we've been given?
Well, I think, for example, I mentioned about the need for LEDAC to meet more often. I think civil society should be allowed to observe what is being discussed, especially in the field of energy and the situation right now. I think they have to be comfortable that the government is really serious in addressing these problems, given the limited resources that we will have. So the private sector advisory council should really be more active, and some of the members of the civil society can also join this group, because this is supposed to be a group that should advise the president. And on the inflation situation, I think the Bangko Sentral can only do so much on the demand side. But on the supply side, it's the government who really have to be more serious in ensuring that they undertake the responsibility very well, especially on the supply chain. So the budget of the different agencies like agriculture, transportation, and others should really be spent wisely.
All hands on deck. It's make or break. Thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate it. Former Finance Secretary Gary Teves. Well, you're watching Money Talks. Coming right up, staggered fuel price hikes begins next week amid the Middle East conflict. And in our Women's Month segment, Give to Gain, founding trustee of the Philippine Women's Economic Network, Jeannie Habilosa, joins us next on building resilience against the impact of external shocks such as the Middle East conflict on women. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Oil companies have agreed to staggered fuel price hikes starting next week. This was the assurance made by Rino Abad, the director of the Department of Energy Oil Industry Management Bureau. He told the big story last night. The final pump increase for Tuesday will be computed this weekend based on 5-day trading at the Mean of Platts, Singapore.
After the 5-day trading price, the oil companies will be able to compute the entire amount of possible increase, and then they will be able to decide what will be the staggered price increase scheme. So that will be announced by Saturday. Well, we've done it already before, so our hope really is to do it again this time, and this is even much worse than before. We really have to work closely with the oil companies in making sure that we will be able to mitigate the price increase by next week.
Abad added that one alternative for the Philippines is to partner with other refining countries outside the Middle East, such as the U.S., Canada, Australia, and Brazil. Another strategy is for the Philippine National Oil Company to procure up to 3 million barrels of diesel, building up government standby reserves. These will be released to oil companies once supply disruptions persist. Meantime, in an interview with Reuters, U.S. President Donald Trump is untroubled by rising gas prices driven by the widening Mideast conflict. He says when the attacks are over, prices will, quote, drop rapidly, and if they rise, they rise. Sources tell Reuters, though, that the White House energy and national security teams are scrambling to develop measures aimed at bringing down gas prices. Brent crude is now trading at $84.31 per barrel, down by nearly 1.3%. West Texas Intermediate is at $78.70 per barrel, falling by nearly 3%. WTI hit $81 per barrel yesterday, its sharpest single-day gain in almost 6 years. And checking in on the markets, U.S. stock futures slightly higher as major averages head toward their worst week since October amid the rising oil prices. The Dow is up by nearly 0.2%. S&P 500 and the Nasdaq rise by 0.1% each. Asian markets tracking Wall Street losses this Friday. Australia's ASX 200 tumbles by over 1.3%. South Korea's Kospi falls by over 1.1%. And Japan's Nikkei 225 slides by 1/3%. U.S. equities fell yesterday after WTI breached above $80 per barrel. The Dow tumbled 1.6%, S&P 500 slid over 1.5%, and the Nasdaq declined by over 0.25%. Asian markets rebounded this Thursday as risk appetites improved. The Kospi rose nearly 10% after its worst sell-off on record. Nikkei 225 jumped by nearly 2%, and the ASX 200 is up 0.4%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng advanced by over 0.25%. U.S. 10-year Treasury yields ticked up to 4.145%, and gold prices settled to $5,065 per ounce. And a quick check at our own markets. PSEI opens this Friday lower, 0.4% down, 6,352. The stock market rebounded Thursday over 1% on the back of bargain hunting activities. The broader all-shares index also advanced by over 1%, with sectoral gauges all in the green. As for the Philippine peso, it opens today a tad weaker, 58.68 to the dollar. Peso weakened yesterday by 6 centavos to settle at 58.63 against the greenback. And the 10-year government bond yields ticked down to 6.178%. In other news, Metro Pacific Tollways Corporation, through its subsidiary NLEX Corporation, is supporting the government's flood mitigation program, Oplan Contra Baha. The nationwide initiative aims to reduce flooding by clearing waterways in vulnerable areas. In Manila, NLEX has begun clearing 4 waterways: Maligaya Creek, Estero de Tutuban, Estero de Sampaloc, and Estero de Valencia. Operations are targeted for completion before the rainy season. The initiative is a joint effort with agencies including the DPWH, MMDA, and the Manila City government. So far, the effort covers over 16,000 meters of waterways, with nearly 200 personnel deployed in coordination with national agencies and local governments. In our month-long women's segment, Give to Gain, we speak with an award-winning artist, entrepreneur, and sustainability and gender advocate, the co-founder of social impact brands like EcoStore and Great Women, and founding trustee of the Philippine Women's Economic Network. As rising tensions in the Middle East prompt higher oil, renewing inflation pressures, how do we look into how women considered the most impacted and how they can cope? With us now is Jeannie Havilosa. Good having you here, Jeannie. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Hi, Cathy. Good morning.
Good morning. You know, it's unfortunate uncertain times as we're talking, the most, especially for women. How does this kind of external shock, do you think, hit women first, not just as consumers, but as workers and entrepreneurs?
Yes, we're going to be seeing 2 angles of this because now with the Middle East war happening, you'll have our women who are mostly OFWs that are there. And you have the women locally here, where when I was listening to your macroeconomic discussions, you look at the numbers and all, but you see microeconomics with women is something they live with day to day. And you'll have initially the challenges of our women abroad right now in the Middle East, where you will have 2 angles. The economic side of it, where chances are their employees are going to be either tightening businesses or they may lose jobs, and the inability to be able to bring money back to the country. That's first. But second is also that of safe spaces, especially during war. There are gender-based violence that can happen in such spaces. So these 2 things are very crucial with our women there. No?
Indeed.
Now
So,
that-
so how do we
Yeah.
help, Jeannie? I mean, this is unprecedented, and we don't even know when it's
True.
going to end. We're faced with higher oil, and a lot of them wanting to be repatriated. Do they have jobs
true.
here? And if
And
they
that's
do
the
want to
scary
stay,
part.
are they safe?
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
Because when they come home here, they may need to be reskilled, retooled with new knowledge, or may even have to take jobs that are lower than what they're doing right now. And I think the challenge there also is how about the women who are here themselves, which have going to be hit by the rising cost of gas, for example, no? So we're looking at how can we find good use for the GAD budget. There is a GAD budget, the country, which is 5% of the total annual budget of the country. How can this be properly used, specific now to the needs that are arising because of the war, the related needs?
So, what
Like-
kinds of conversations have you been having amongst women executives and leaders? And you take up the whole space there, the ecosystem of women leaders in corporate, as well as the small entrepreneurs, in order to make use and make the most out of this budget, given that resources are really going to be lacking once pump prices go up.
That's right. So an initial thing would be maybe to be able to give them some cash incentives, especially for the small micro entrepreneurs, because they will need capital. There should be a relook perhaps at the way loans are being given to women, especially on that level of the micros and the small, because it's impossible for them to be able to continue at the rate this is going. They are already struggling on that level. Can you imagine now with even more tightening and expenses going up, how their small businesses are going to be impacted? Plus, the women are in jobs that are often very vulnerable because they don't have the benefits. So when you see it from a bigger ecosystem of women where the large companies can take a look at how can they seriously purchase from women-owned companies, how can they bring the micro-entrepreneurial space and their businesses into the bigger supply chain? You know, sometimes while capital may not be directly given to the women, I think everybody should put on a different lens just to be able to help the angle of bringing women closer to the supply chain where they can do marketing and they can sell their products. But the challenge will really be for government when we have a lot of our OFWs coming back here, where a lot of training will happen, and how do we find the jobs? So one thing that the PhilWen is trying to organize right now, and PhilWen is a coalition of 5 different women organizations who each themselves have networks all over the country, is to be able to look at solid national programs that can integrate the gaps. There's so many gaps, right? So even if the private government is doing what it can, not just for women, but for everybody, we at PhilWen are looking with a lens of women to see how can we now work with government sharply, strongly, and smartly to make sure that we oversee likewise that budget of government going to the correct kinds of needs. If
Right.
it's a training, if it's perhaps capital support for our micro entrepreneurs, this needs to be looked at in a new manner. This budget
is-
is there.
it is
We
a-
need to look at it, yes.
Yeah, a whole lot of tests as well as opportunity, I presume. And it's not just going to be Women's Month for sure, but for all of the months in the
all.
year. Please keep us up to speed on what happens then. Jeannie, thank you so
Yes,
much for
for
joining
sure.
us. Appreciate the insights. Jeannie
Thank you very
Javilosa
much.
of EcoStore, Great Women, and PhilWen. And before we go, here are a couple of movies to catch over the weekend. First up, The Bride. The film follows a lonely Frankenstein who travels to 1930s Chicago to ask a scientist to create a companion for him. The experiment revives a murdered woman, the bride, setting off a dark story filled with murder, obsession, and a wild romance.
Yes! Everybody dance! Everybody sing! Everybody move!
Please don't hurt me, please. I'm sorry.
What are you sorry for?
Meanwhile, the 1978 Metro Manila Film Festival classic Atchay is returning to the big screen exclusively at Ayala Mall's cinemas. The film stars the late superstar Nora Honor as a provincial woman who moves to the city to work as a household helper, only to face abuse from her employers. The film won Best Picture at the festival, while Honor took home Best Performer Award. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again Monday, 9:30 a.m. Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time. Have a great day and a great weekend ahead. See you Monday.